Good morning, everyone.
Hello, there we go. We're on. We're live.
on.
We're live.
It's great to see you here. It's a beautiful morning here in Canberra. I just wanted to say what a beautiful welcome and smoking ceremony we just saw, led by Auntie Matilda House. That was wonderful. And so in keeping with that, let's take a moment to pay our respects to the traditional custodians, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, where we gather today, and pay our respects to elders like Auntie Matilda, past and present.
Yeah, this ceremony reminds us of the deep connection between people, land and climate, which sets the tone for the vital conversations that we're going to be having over the next couple of days right here.
Welcome to the 2024 Better Futures Forum, everyone.
Yeah. Woo! Yes.
That is the spirit. Nice.
Such verve and excitement in the room. Oh my God. Is this the Logies?
Pretty much. So I'm Lee Constable, and alongside me is my apprentice, Dan Ilic. We're thrilled to guide you through the next couple of days of inspiring talks, panels and discussions. We'll be talking to leaders, innovators and change makers from across Australia and indeed the Pacific.
I love this event. This is about my third event I've been part of for Better Futures Australia. Have you been part of many?
I've only been virtually during the dark times.
I just in the COVID,
yeah,
or Morrison era. It's hard to tell. I really enjoy this event because it brings together so many dedicated people who are doing the actual work when it comes to climate action. They're at the coalface of climate action.
Yeah, cold. No, but
they're shutting down the coalface of climate action.
They're at the coalface to do some mine site rehabilitation.
Yeah. Absolutely. This group is really cooking with gas, so to speak.
The rubber hits the road here.
Yeah. I'm really excited about today because this session, over the next 2 days, we're going to be looking how local actions are going to be shaping national ambitions for the transition to a renewable, resilient and equitable future for all. We're going to have 80 speakers, 20 sessions. They're all going to be very, very good. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. First, some housekeeping. As the lady here, I should tell you. No, it wasn't a sexist reason.
You do one and I can do the other. We'll split it up equitably.
Let's split the housekeeping. Firstly, I'll tell you to keep your phones on silent, but do keep using them to engage in the conversation. And if you do, use the hashtag BetterFutures2024.
Bathrooms are located outside the cinema and there will be breaks for tea and coffee and food in the gallery. There you go.
50-50. Beautiful.
And it's such a beautiful space we're in. It's really good. Remember, also, if you are going to the Climate Leaders Dinner tonight, there's going to be an electric bus to whiz us from here to the Arboretum and back. That's leaving at 4:45 tonight, so don't miss the bus. But what is a conference without its sponsors? Big thank you to the CSIRO, the ACT Government, the ANU, JT Productions, who are doing all the technical wizardry today. And also, of course, right here, this amazing venue, the National Film and Sound Archive. What a beautiful, spectacular venue to have this event in. I love how this building is right opposite the road of the National Sciences Academy. I love that because, we're all, dedicated to climate science here, and this building is dedicated to propaganda, and, it's hand in hand. It's good to see them right opposite each other.
Well, before this was about sound and film, it was actually a place of anatomical learning.
Really?
There were lots of live dissections going on, and we will be dissecting some grisly topics.
In fact, if you look under your chair right now, you will have a leg. You've got a leg. There's a chair and a leg joke there for anyone paying attention.
Very good.
Thank you.
Professional comedian.
Yeah, great.
But we've got actually some keynotes now. We've got our keynote session, which is a huge lineup. Welcome to the stage, the four of you. While they're coming up, we can tell you a little bit about them, but they'll be discussing local initiatives, national climate strategies, and the vision for the future powered by renewable energy.
So if you're in this session, head on up here. Christian Hampson, CEO of Yerrabingin, and WA Minister Reece Whitby, Brennan French, CEO of Energy Consumers Australia, Michele O'Neill, President of the Australian Council of Trade Unions. They'll share their insights in the role of community, government and unions in this critical transition. Who are we missing? Here's Reece. Here he is. Give it up for these people.
Take it away.
In my language, Wamajika, Malpamaninyata, Christian Manaru, Warang, Dagabu, Mianga, Ngunnawal Ngambri, Dagabu Mianga, my Auntie Matilda over there. So fantastic to be here with all you within country today, but in particular with one of country's traditional custodians, but also to all brothers and sisters in the room and all of our colleagues here today talking and living and thinking about country. Huge privilege to be asked to open this conference to discuss better futures. I was only talking to my aunt about, I have a 27-year-old, is my eldest, and my youngest has just turned 1. So I am looking forward to the future when I might get some sleep, hopefully. Oh, good, I got to laugh. There you go, Dan. So acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is a very important part of what we do today. As a designer, acknowledgement is a fundamental way that we think about the place that we are within. Acknowledgement is also the response for us of how we act, how we feel when we hear a welcome from traditional custodians. So when we are within country, acknowledgement is the opportunity to understand how we can connect with country. So it's not about reading a sign. It's not about the words even. You can say whatever you want. You can even say, I don't know. But acknowledgement is actually about that thought and then the action. So for us, in the way we design for the future, acknowledgement is a fundamental principle of how we think about designing. My name's Hampson. I'm CEO of Yerrabingin. I'm a Manaroo and Woiwurrung man. And my company, Yerrabingin, the word comes from my grandmother's language and it means we walk together. But if you've noticed the logo, the human footprints are last, because it actually means we walk in the footsteps of those who have taught us how to live within country. So that opportunity to understand and learn from country is another part of acknowledgement, acknowledging that we are looking to the future and that we can understand the wisdom of the past to make ourselves move forward into that space. So at Yerrabingin, we look at this opportunity to design with country today as an amazing privilege. We were always taught all of our engineering, all of our innovation, all of our technology comes from our relationship with the ecology that surrounds us, so that ecological system, which turns our cultural system into a way that we collect that knowledge, understand it, and continue to adapt and remain resilient. Because country is resilient, and therefore, in turn, we are as well by being connected to it. So the opportunity to become resilient is there around us at all times. We just need to open our eyes and our ears up a little bit more. As my old uncle would say, be more of a bilby, right? Have big ears, big eyes, and a little mouth. He used to say that to me a lot. But we are thinking about this opportunity of designing for country and what is its impact? How does it bring something forward into the world? And how do we leave something for future generations to take forward? But also that is an invitation for everybody. We all have a connection to country. We've all got the opportunity to be part of the role of looking after it. So for us, we think about these 4 pillars. Everything we do at Yerrabingin and every interaction that we have, we think about that. So at the top of it is this idea of custodianship, and I'll talk a little bit more about that because that is really about us. That is how we do these things together. But country also drives innovation. If you think our people have been here for tens of thousands of years and have seen this country change so much. The plants have changed, different things have happened. Sydney Harbour was a little river that got filled up by the ocean and then pushed up into a huge delta into the Parramatta. And all these things have happened. And how did we understand how to continue to remain resilient? We look to our non-human kin. The plants, the animals, the mountains, the rivers, all those things are the things that talk to us and speak to us. So how do we think about that opportunity to innovate? We understand from them how we need to innovate. There are plenty of species, ecological systems that are managing and surviving at the moment. The other part we look at is legacy. So for us, that is part of what we must do. We must leave a better place for all into the future. And that is a responsibility about how we hold knowledge. Country is the hugest environmental database in the world, and it is about the physical practice of culture, song, dance, story, art, is how we record that knowledge and we attach it to place. And those places are connected across thousands of kilometres that create song lines that allow us to constantly access that database. And then the last one is regeneration. And I'll talk a little bit more about sustainability, but sustainability for us is not enough. As First Nations people, we're not sustaining anything. We are actually in an age where we are having the greatest impact of all. So what can we do? How can we change that? How can we be a positive force? So we're in the NFSA, and an interesting, I thought I'd give my my colleagues here a plug. We worked originally on a project to look at designing with country here, and also as a landscape architect, we want to create more habitat around this building. We want to create habitat that is both inhabited by people and inhabited by non-human kin, but also a place that connects to this idea of custodianship here at the NFSA, because the NFSA are custodians. They've held on to propaganda, stories, all these amazing documentaries. If you look at some of these old black and white ones, you know how they used to like talk about our mob and them old white fellas and in the 60s and 70s talking about us walking around in the bush with our pickaninnies. But the other great thing is those stories are there, and it's important that that knowledge is retained. And as custodians, we look to explore the sustainability strategy that was recently done as an opportunity to extend custodianship that sits within the FSA into a more broader context. So this was our way that we could think about bringing a different lens, all these nice crossovers between what the NFSA does. The future. This is a shameless plug. This is a render from a project that I'm doing at the moment. Probably looks like it's a long way away. Hopefully it's 2026. As long as the government doesn't slow it up too much. But this idea of the future, how do we think about the future? What are we sustaining in the future? Who are we sustaining it for? So this is a vision of a park that's on the edge of Sydney Harbour, but it is a piece of land that's been reclaimed, had refuse placed within it and concrete placed on top of it at the moment. So if you go next to Barangaroo, the big tower in Sydney, you'll see this space that currently looks like a car park. Our task at Yerrabingin is to regenerate that. And we want to regenerate it physically. We want to regenerate its role within country. But if you think about it, even the piece of art, this piece of art is an amazing piece. We wanted to share the 360 of country with everybody. Way deep down into the ground, kilometres into the ground, way up into the sky, all the things, all the elements that surround us. So this is what is known as the moon vessel. And it's called a vessel because it's both oculus to the cycle of the moon, but it also talks about how the moon acts upon different species and also the tides. But if you go to the edge of Sydney Harbour these days, you never witness a tide because it's always underneath the harbour that's been built over. But also the opportunity for it is it has an ecological function within the park. It is part of the regenerative water system within the park, and is also regeneratively spiritually for First Nations people. So this idea of regeneration for the future is something that we feel very strongly about, and it's something that is happening right now, but we are hoping to be part of a better future. So just to finish off, a question that we always ask ourselves, and not one I'm looking for an answer, is what sort of ancestor do you want to be? Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Can I acknowledge we're meeting on the lands of the traditional owners of this land, and I'd like to acknowledge them. Christian, thank you for your welcome to country and your opening remarks. My name is Reece Whitby. I'm the Minister for Environment, Energy and Climate Action in Western Australia. And Western Australia is the biggest emitter in the Commonwealth, with the dirty, great big state pumping out greenhouse gases. So can I begin by apologising for that fact? As Minister, I've got a hell of a job being the Minister from Western Australia, responsible for climate action. And I acknowledge that, and I'm going to get into the challenges and opportunities. Before I do so, I'd like to also acknowledge the colleagues on the stage who'll be speaking here today, Brendan and Michele, and look forward to hearing what they have to say. Thank you, Lee and Dan. I hope, haven't got as humorous material here, but I'll try. Western Australia has all the ingredients to become a renewable energy superpower. We have abundant wind resources, some of the best in the world, consistent and powerful to generate lots of green electrons. We have plentiful sunshine, and of course, more than any other state of the Commonwealth, we have lots of space. The three magic ingredients for renewable energy: sun, wind and space. We also have the expertise, the workforce, the infrastructure, the trade relationships and the history of being a major energy exporter. Our state is already a key supplier of critical minerals and is one of the few jurisdictions on the planet to host all the reserves you need to make batteries. But Our economy, as I said before, is underpinned by hard-to-abate industries. So our path to net zero will be unique, it will be tougher, it will look different from any other state. Our proposed legislation and policies acknowledge this reality. We're committed to enacting climate change legislation in this term of government. This legislation will require interim targets informed by the Commonwealth Government's international obligations. We'll have emission budgets that will ensure the integrity of those targets. And the relevant Minister of the day will be providing an annual report on progress to the Parliament. WA's climate action will be further supported by ending native logging throughout southwest Western Australia, something we have done. Expanding our state's conservation estate by 20%, 5 million hectares in 5 years, something we will achieve by the end of this year. And initiatives like the Green Energy Approvals Unit. Now, decarbonisation pathways for the private sector are supported through our sectoral emissions reduction strategy. So, Western Australia is poised to benefit like few other places on earth with what comes after the Great Transition. Our state's energy systems are the most isolated on the planet, and that gives us a unique oversight into how it operates. That's why our state government is legislating for net zero emissions by 2050. We're exiting all our state-owned coal-fired power by 2030. We are a standalone energy network. We're not connected to the national energy market. So that's a big call, to be totally out of coal. We're not connected interstate to other coal producers or coal burners. We are standing alone. We're investing $5.4 billion in wind power, battery storage and transmission. Now, our investment is expected to result in a 40% cut in emissions in our state's main grid, and we're also investing more than $1.2 billion in expanding the capacity of our southwest system to get more of that wind energy I spoke about into the system. We've already made significant progress. Last year, more than a third of our state's domestic energy came from renewable energy, comprising rooftop solar, 17%, wind, 16%, and large-scale solar, 2%. So we've got room to grow, but those are impressive numbers at the moment. We already have built some of the biggest grid-scale batteries on the planet. 300 megawatts in Kwinana, south of Perth, another 500 megawatt battery coming online next year in Kellie, and another privately owned 500 megawatt battery also in Kellie. These are some of the biggest grid-scale batteries on the planet. And they will power hundreds of thousands of homes. They'll be shifting that energy we collect in masses on our rooftop solar during the day, and then dispatching it again in the evening when demand is highest. It's good news because 40% of Western Australian homes have rooftop solar, more than Victoria and New South Wales, and every year, enough new rooftop solar goes on West Australian homes, which is the equivalent of a new gas-fired power station being added to the system every year. So, good story there. But I look to our north, our Pilbara region, which is twice the size of Victoria with the population of Wagga Wagga. It is a big, dirty emitter. All those iron ore mines and other mines produce a lot of emissions. About 40% of the safeguard facilities in our country are located in that one area. So we've got a big challenge up there. But what we're doing is building a network which will mean that emitters will have access to renewable energy. There's amazing quality of renewables up there, sun and wind. And then you have that decarbonisation opportunity, and further you have opportunities to do more, to make green steel, to create battery metals, to create clean hydrogen exports. If we were to process all the iron ore we export from the Pilbara, instead of shipping it to China, but we process that into green iron in the Pilbara using renewable energy, we would cut worldwide emissions by 8%. Now, Australia's emissions are between 1% and 2% of the world's emissions. Imagine the possibilities of doing that, making a contribution, accounting for our own emissions, but also a sizable chunk of the planet's emissions too. So that's the opportunity we have in Western Australia. I do have some notes here on nuclear and that option, but I've got about 5 seconds left, and that's not enough to tell you why nuclear doesn't make sense on any level. So in conclusion, my 7 minutes is up, but I'd like to just say to you all, Western Australia knows it has a huge challenge. We're the biggest emitter in a country of big emitters. The per capita emissions of Australia put us right near the top. And in Western Australia, you can probably triple that as well. But we do know we have an obligation to the nation and to the world in doing our bit in reducing emissions, not only to help reduce our own emissions, but to play a critical role in reducing international emissions as well. So with that, thank you, and be aware that while we're a dirty, great big emitter, we know what we have to do, and we're on the course of doing it. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Minister. And I very much appreciate the welcome that we've received here today. My name is Brendan. I'm here to talk about energy. I'm from Sydney. I flew in yesterday. Last weekend, I went to the new metro stations. Has anybody gone underneath Sydney into the new metro? It's quite exciting. I must admit, it was a little breathtaking for me. I felt like I was in the middle of a secular cathedral. It was a moment of pride for some reason, pride in infrastructure, because it felt to me to be exactly the kind of infrastructure that I love, which is shared benefit infrastructure. And it reminded me, I think, of the opportunity that arises from democratising investment at a national, at a global level. And that's, I think, the challenge that we all find ourselves in at the moment. We're engaged in a process of retooling the energy system in Australia. And I guess I'm an historian by training, and I always recall that in the Anglosphere, there's probably two ways of doing sort of macro infrastructure programs. The first is deep concentration of wealth. We saw a lot of this in the petro barons and the rail barons of the 19th century, of course, that you'd all be very familiar with off the back of the invention of the internal combustion engine. These are, by their nature, low entropy systems, and they tend to concentrate wealth and opportunity, and that lasts for a long time. So many of the names associated with these kinds of investment infrastructure programs 200 years ago are still with us today. But of course, there are other ways, and the one that interests me most and that I'm desperately looking to see in the infrastructure development in Australia is what you might call this shared benefit program. And the one that I like to refer to when it comes to the Australian energy transition, this might sound a little silly to you, but it's the sewering of London. For those of you who have visited London, you probably hadn't thought much about the sewer system. But in the 1860s, of course, this was of enormous importance because all sewer discharge flew straight into the Thames. Every year, there were tens of thousands of people who died from cholera and typhoid. And so in the late 1850s, there was a massive infrastructure program to modernise the system. And that required, for example, about 400 million bricks and about the removal of 3 million cubic tonnes of earth and the development of Portland concrete, which is the concrete, for example, that was used for this building. And this was an enormous program of work. But what is most fascinating to me is the design principles that underpinned it were that all for one and one for all. The benefit has to accrue for everyone living in London in order for the benefit to accrue to anyone living in London. And I'm particularly attracted by that idea when we think of what sort of energy system we will learn, gather, earn, and grow into over the coming 5 to 10 years. Now, I'm going to suggest a few principles for you to think about with regard to the development of this energy system. The first really is that the success, that is this notion of a community benefit, that success has to be demonstrable to both the numerator and the denominator for this to work. Everyone has to take a benefit from the new energy system. And the challenge is, of course, that 10 years ago when you talked about the trade-offs inherent in energy, it was often the trade-off between consumers and investors, or consumers and industry. increasingly over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see trade-offs between consumers, between those consumers who, for instance, can hedge high bills in the future through investing in consumer energy resources like solar, battery, and EVs and so on, and those who, due to their circumstances, cannot. And remember that 48% of Australians don't live in a single home that they own or are paying off. There are also, of course, trade-offs between consumers who can shift their consumption across times of day. There are trade-offs for consumers who can afford to be exposed to a spiky wholesale price against a standing retail price and so on. So these kinds of design decisions are at the core of what governments and regulators are facing at the moment. And I think it's critical that local communities and communities across the country, communities of interest, make clear their standing in these decisions, because communities pay for this infrastructure. It's designed for them. Now, I guess a couple of points that I'd make in this regard. The first is that sort of retail energy is almost a closed pool in a way. It's like a lot of services and systems. If I pay less for my power, there's a chance that someone else is paying more. And that's the nature of the system, perhaps. But we need to stare into that to determine where these counterflow cross subsidies exist, where it's possible that the benefit that accrues to one party has been removed or unknowingly shifted from another party. And so the question for all of us is to stare into these questions really closely and ensure that this isn't sort of an 80-20 paradigm. I was a banker for 15 years. This is sort of the confessional moment. And as a banker, the question was always 80-20. Have you heard this before? 80% get a good outcome and 20% don't get such a hot outcome. That's great. That's a high credit. That's a good outcome. But the problem is it's the same 20% all the time. Yeah? And so we create potentially an energy underclass. And we do a lot of surveying in the organisation I'm part of. And 54% of people today say that they really can't afford the energy that they have to pay for. But 78% say that they know someone who will not be able to afford energy in 3 years. That's an alarming number. The 1.6% of people on the highest incomes, above 150K, 1.6% of that income is spent on energy, but for people in the lowest quintile, below 20, below 40, it's 13.6%. So there are already enormous disparities in what we acknowledge to be an essential service. So I guess the point that I would want to leave you with from a design perspective is that there are opportunities for us to elect the energy system that we want. There's an opportunity for us to ensure that collectively we use this remarkable challenge, just as they did when they resealed London, to ensure that the person with the least opportunity and the person with the least access is given the same opportunity as everybody else. Because there's a recognition, like public education and public health, that energy is a civilizing virtue in a society. And if we can invest in it for all, it creates great opportunity for all. Thank you for your time this morning.
Hi everyone, my name is Michele O'Neill. I'm the president of the ACTU, and I want to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people and pay all my respects to elders past and present. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And thanks very much, Lee and Dan, for getting us going, and to Christian and Reece and Brendan for starting off today. Christian, I love that story about the bilby and that life lesson. There's a few leaders in our union movement and across the country, I reckon, who could well learn that lesson. Friends, too many people in Australia are doing it really tough right now. And whether it's groceries or housing or power bill, the cost of just living is keeping many people up at night. And I want to talk today about that last item, power bills, and how we can bring them down fast by putting power back in the hands of Australian people. Last year, the ACTU commissioned a price gouging inquiry, and it confirmed what most people already knew, that high consumer electricity prices are being driven in part by corporate greed, giant energy companies manipulating markets and ripping off customers. And as if that's not bad enough, big business's cheerleader, Peter Dutton, now wants Australians to pay for his expensive nuclear fantasy, which analysts say would drive up average power bills another $1,000 a year and would leave power workers, of course, without a just transition. Meanwhile, the climate crisis continues to make everyday life in Australia more difficult. Our summer temperatures are increasingly topping 40 degrees Celsius, a range where even basic activities like going to the shops, playing sport, or for many working people, working outdoors, has become not only uncomfortable, but extremely unsafe. Australian people deserve better. We shouldn't be caught between price gouging of giant energy companies and the climate disasters that many of these companies actually helped create. There's a better way, and we reckon it's time to seize it. Over the past year, the ACTU has come together with allies from social services, clean industry, climate advocacy groups, and First Nations organisations to craft a shared plan that calls for unprecedented ambition in 4 key areas. Firstly, building the right renewables in the right places. Secondly, using that power to create world-leading clean industries with safe, secure, good quality jobs. Thirdly, strengthening Australia's adaptive capacity. And lastly, and the focus of what I'm talking about today, repowering homes and communities through electrification and efficiency. This last pillar is going to be key to getting Australia's energy consumers out from between a rock and a hard place. Australia's lucky. We have more sun and wind per capita than almost any country on earth. And the best way to cut power bills is to harness that abundant energy with household-level renewable upgrades. That's why 1 in 3 Australian households have already installed solar panels and are reaping the benefits. But household clean energy technology has come a really long way. It's not just solar panels anymore. It's batteries that allow households and even whole communities to store the power generated for panels for longer than ever before, ensuring a reliable supply regardless of whether the sun's shining. It's new electric appliances, from stoves to electric heating and cooling, that are cheaper to run than our gas predecessors and don't produce indoor air pollution. And it's efficiency upgrades that minimise energy waste and demand response technologies that optimise energy usage. It's improvements to electric transport, whether it's private electric vehicles or public electric buses and trains. So these technologies are opening up a whole new window of opportunity for Australian energy consumers, and it's the polar opposite of Dutton's expensive nuclear pipe dream. According to analysis from the Victorian State Government, new all-electric homes save $1,000 a year on their power bills compared to new mixed energy houses, and over $2,200 if they also have solar panels. Converting an existing home from gas to electricity saves about $1,700 a year and over $2,700 if you've also got solar panels. These savings matter for workers and working families. It could mean you don't have to stress about whether you can afford to buy fresh fruit and veggies for your family. It could mean better healthcare. It could mean finally being able to plan a holiday with your family. That's why the ACTU came together with this broad and diverse coalition of civil society allies to develop a federal policy plan to repower our homes. We'll be launching this publicly tomorrow as part of a major new campaign. And the goal of the package is really simple. Support every Australian household to upgrade their home with clean energy technology and reap the power bill savings for years to come. This is about Australians taking back control of our power and our power bills, not leaving it in the hands of greedy energy companies. It'll be our power because we'll be the ones generating it and storing it. Oil and gas are fundamentally excludable goods. That is, they lend themselves to being controlled by private profit-making companies. They get drilled up by large energy companies, then sold on volatile international commodity markets, which subject consumers to unpredictable price spikes. The sun and the wind are not excludable goods. They're not owned by anyone and their supply can't be restricted. They're everywhere and they belong to all of us. This is also about creating a new generation of good union jobs. Jobs and Skills Australia estimates that getting to net zero by 2050 will require an additional 80,000 electricians. Many of those sparkies will be employed electrifying and retrofitting Australian homes and businesses. That's why Repower Our Homes package calls for historic investment in training infrastructure along with a national accreditation and licensing scheme, so that we can make sure that every one of those skilled workers is delivering safe, high-quality home upgrades in a job that in itself is safe, secure and well paid. Finally, this is about cutting climate pollution. A global survey published last month in the research journal Science found that consumer incentives and subsidies, especially when paired with things like building codes, vehicle and appliance standards, are the best way to cutting emissions in the building and transport sector. And given that sector makes up 37% of Australians' emissions, the Repower Our Homes package is essential for achieving a net zero economy. Now, you're about to hear from an excellent panel more about the details of this household clean energy package, but I wanted to end on a really important note. The household clean energy subsidies contained in the landmark US Inflation Reduction Act were not devised with any consideration of equity. So although more than 3.4 million American families have used the incentives to upgrade their homes, they were disproportionately concentrated in their upper income brackets. Australia can't make this mistake. We must do better. This can't be about Teslas in teal seats. That's why our household clean energy package focuses its support on those most in need: low-income families, renters and First Nations communities. That's how we ensure a fair go in Australia. That's how we ensure that everyone, regardless of where you live and how much you earn, can reap the savings from household clean energy. The ACTU really looks forward to working alongside all of you to make this vision a reality that we can see and touch right in our own homes. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Christian, Reece, Michele, and Brendan. That was so good, so informed. I learnt so much. The idea that we could make green iron in Western Australia and kill 8% of global emissions is just mind-boggling to me. Pretty astounding. What did you learn?
The Bilby principle was important to learn as an MC with a big mouth, you know.
Yeah.
I think I need to make my ears even bigger.
That's why people call me a pelican, because I've got a big mouth. We've got time for one question. So if there's one question in the room, up the back there, we've got a microphone coming to you.
Hi. I was just, I guess it's a question for Brendan around, Amanda Cole from The Next Economy. You didn't mention gas as part of your plan for Western Australia, so I was just wondering, that's a big piece of the emissions piece. So what's the plan there?
Yeah. Look, thank you. That's a question for me. Yes. Look, Michele mentioned how new generation and storage can play a very important role in getting away from fossil fuels, but the technology, to be quite frank, is not there yet. Also in Western Australia, we don't have the advantages of hydropower. So you need a couple of things essential for hydropower. We have all of those things in Western Australia except the mountains and the water. So hydropower is not an option for us. So we do need that firming fuel for our network. So yes, gas will play a role. We argue that it plays a role internationally in helping decarbonise Southeast Asian markets in particular, in Japan and South Korea, where they want to exit coal. As I said, we're exiting coal, but we will rely on gas as a firming power. So in our grid, we're building lots of renewables, solar and wind. We'll have battery storage, but we do need that to get us through the periods where we will come up short, and we still will for a number of years. Gas plays a role. We will exit slowly out of gas. It'll play a role in our energy system, but what we will see is a gradual decline. We're also looking at what the future in hydrogen looks like. So hydrogen is an important storage of energy. That's its main function. It's expensive to produce and in terms of energy, because you expend more energy producing the energy on the other side, but it still has an important value, and certainly there's more development of technology to come to make that a real good solution. But it is there, and we're working on it. So in short, gas is part of our story in Western Australia, both in terms of exporting and providing opportunities for international markets to decarbonise, but also internally. We know gas, unlike coal and unlike nuclear, is flexible. So when there's lots of renewables in the system, when the sun's shining brightly and the wind's blowing, we can dial our gas right down. And then when the renewables dissipate, then we can bring gas up again. Cannot do it with coal, cannot do it with nuclear, has one speed flat out. So that's why we're so opposed to nuclear, one of the reasons, apart from the cost and all the other practicalities. It's why we're getting out of coal, but we will have a role for gas in our system for years to come, but it will decline. And the new gas generation turbines are much more cleaner burning and can be switched over to hydrogen when hydrogen gets into the market.
Thank you for your question there. I personally would love the ability to dial my gas right down.
I'm a renter, so
yeah.
I just... I got an air fryer though, so that's been handy.
That's good, yeah. Please, everyone, please give it up for Christian, Reece, Brendan and Michele. That was a great panel.
Thanks so much. And the Minister just wanted to make his apologies that he will have to run off to some other... And Michele as well. But of course, you can find their details online if you look hard enough. Moving on from our keynotes to the conversation I'm really excited about, and which relates to what we've already started a conversation on, repowering households and communities. This session will focus on how we provide communities with the tools and support to electrify and transition to renewable energy.
Moderating this panel with an incredible lineup with representatives from Renew Australia for All Coalition is Miriam Lyons from the Sunrise Project. And joining us up here are also Katie Hepworth from the Electrical Trades Union, Asha Ramzan from the Sydney Community Forum, and Kellie Court from ACOS, and Kate Minter from Rewiring Australia. Not We-Wiring Australia. That's a totally different organisation. Miriam, over to you.
I can yell, but perhaps I better not. Good morning, everyone. Can we get another big round of applause for those opening speeches, for our fabulous MCs, for the Better Futures crew for making this fantastic event happen? Wasn't that a fantastic welcome to country from Auntie Matilda House this morning? I learned a new word that I'm very grateful for, and I think is a really good one for us to all keep in mind over the next couple of days. Injamara. So that was a Wiradjuri word that Auntie Matilda was kind enough to share with us that means honouring and respecting each other. And I think it's a pretty good mood to take into the conversations that we'll be having, about how we honour and respect the land that we live on, our future, and how we all look after each other along the way. It is a real honour to be here with you today on unceded Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. I acknowledge the elders of this country and recognise that First Nations people not only have the right to determine what happens on their land, but must be first in line to benefit from the shift to a cleaner economy. And if you're not already familiar with the fantastic work that the First Nations Clean Energy Network are doing to turn that principle into a reality, do look them up. Their recommendations hold not just for what we'll be discussing in this panel, but across the next 2 days of this forum. So yeah, my name's Miriam Lyons. I'm lucky enough to be introducing 4 very powerful women who are leading the push to repower our energy system to work better for people and the planet, starting in our homes and communities. So we have the fabulous Asha Ramzan, who is the Executive Officer of the Sydney Community Forum, which has been working towards social justice, inclusion and sustainability for and with socially and economically disadvantaged and marginalised communities in Sydney since 1974. She also leads Voices for Power, a project of the Sydney Alliance, which brings diverse cultural, religious and community leaders together to build collective power and organise for clean and affordable energy solutions for their communities. Big round of applause for Asha. We also have Kellie, who is the Program Director on Climate and Energy at the Australian Council of Social Services, which represents thousands of frontline community groups and national agencies working to support the people who've been hit hardest by the profit-driven price spirals we have seen in recent years. Give it up. We have Kate Minter, who is the Managing Director of Rewiring Australia, which advocates for the role of households in the energy system and promotes the evidence that Australia can be the first country where efficient electric appliances and vehicles supported by a clean energy grid will save every home money. Love that. And Katie Hepworth is the National Policy Director at the Electrical Trades Union, which represents more than 60,000 electricians, apprentices and electrical workers across the country, and has just released a really important report on the skills and training policies we'll need to make sure there's a well-paid, well-trained and growing workforce of Sparkies ready to repower our homes and communities into the next decade and beyond. Give it up. So I am going to kick off with a few questions for our panellists, and then you will have a chance to ask a few questions, otherwise known as the bit where people deliver short essays disguised as questions. No, just kidding. But if you do find yourself with a burning question, hold on to it. We should be able to get time to get to some. So just to open us up, Asha, I know that at Sydney Community Forum and Voices for Power, you've been listening to and working with migrant communities for a very long time. What are the most important insights that you want to pass on to policymakers about what these communities are calling for? And what would it mean if the people that you've been listening to saw the government stepping up to extend the benefits of solar efficiency and electrification to more households in a way that works for them?
Is this on? Oh, great. Okay. So the Voices for Power project has been listening to thousands of migrant people in Western and Southwestern Sydney since 2017. The stories we've heard confirm for us what we already know, and to quote Brendan, they are the 20%. And if we don't organise and we don't privilege their voices and we don't look at the solutions that will fit for them, they will continue to be the 20% who are left behind and who bear the cost that being marginal, not having access to renewables and having no control over where they live. So what we've heard is people need to understand the energy system. I'm not sure about people here, but we have a very complex energy system. And what our leaders have asked us is, why is it so complex? We don't have the answer to that, but we do know that we need to actually make sure that they're energy literate. So I'm going to share a story of an Afghan refugee family arrived in the country just 8 months, and we have a social enterprise with Afghan women. And one of the women came to the social enterprise, which is on a Friday, and said, "My electricity bill is $2,000. Why? I can't pay it. Why? And when I asked her about her household, she has 12 people living there. And that is what migrants do when they first arrive. And this is a refugee family. So rentals are so high in Sydney, they live together in a multi-generational family. And because they live in Western Sydney, where it's so hot in summer and so cold in winter, and the houses are not energy efficient, they bought 4 portable air conditioning units. The youngest in that household is 3 months old, and the grandma is in her 80s. And so they'd been running in summer these air conditioning units day and night, and their bill was $2,000. So our energy literacy program actually looks at how people can minimize their energy usage, how they can maximize what they can change over their environment in that household, putting up curtains and those things. And it's in plain English and community languages. So we've learned that people need to understand the energy system first, and that they also need to have access to information in their own language. So our work has been about building the voices of migrant communities and making sure that they are not left behind and are not the bottom 20%.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Asha. And I think my next question was for Kellie, actually, but what you've just said really answers it in a lot of ways, which is I've seen a lot of polls showing that the majority of people back the shift to clean energy, but so many just aren't sure whether or not they themselves will see the benefit of it. So, Kellie, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about why that is and what would be needed to support the people who have missed out so far.
Thanks, Mim. I'd also like to acknowledge the lands of the traditional owners that we're on and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Look, it's a really good question. There are 3 million people in Australia that live below the poverty line, and millions more that are on the verge because of the cost of living crisis that we're experiencing here in Australia at the moment. We know that people experiencing financial and social disadvantage spend more of their incomes on energy than people on higher incomes. We also know that they're depriving themselves of energy. They're not heating or cooling their home. They're having fewer showers. They're turning fridges off at night. They're cooking differently. They're going to bed early. They're not having people around in their homes. They're becoming socially isolated as well. And we also know that even then, people still can't afford their bills. They're